was the kind of Alabama summer night that felt too quiet. Heavy air, cicadas screaming from the trees, and not a single car on Highway 14. Linda Carver, just 22, had clocked out from her shift at Betty's Diner around 10:45 p.m. She told her co-worker she'd stop by the gas station for a soda before heading home. That was the last anyone saw of her alive. When the morning shift came in, Linda's mother had already called the diner in tears. She never made it home. By sunrise, her blue Chevy Nova was found idling near the old iron bridge that crossed Miller Creek. The headlights were still on. The driver's door stood open, like someone had stepped out mid-thought. Inside the car, her purse was missing, but her wallet and a half-finished cup of coffee sat in the console. The passenger seat was reclined, and faint smudges of dirt streaked across the handle. Police searched the area for hours, combing through the brush and creek banks, calling out her name. But there was no sign of struggle, no footprints, no blood, just silence. Locals whispered that it looked too clean, like someone had known exactly what they were doing. Sheriff Dalton, the lead at the time, chalked it up to a runaway case, claiming young folks leave all the time, but the town didn't buy it, not Linda. She was kind, responsible, and engaged to marry a mechanic named Billy Rhodes that fall. She wasn't the kind to just vanish. Over the next week, the case grew stranger. Residents reported hearing screams by the bridge around midnight, but no one called it in. Just kids, they said. A fisherman swore he saw a man sitting in Linda's car earlier that night, wearing what looked like a county deputy's jacket. The sheriff's department dismissed it as rumor, saying no deputies were on duty in that area. Still, the story stuck. Parents started locking their doors early. The diner closed an hour sooner, and just like that, Maple Creek, a town where nothing bad ever happened, began to feel like the kind of place where something dark was hiding in plain sight. For nearly 40 years, Linda Carver's case file sat in the basement of the Maple Creek County Sheriff's Office, buried under stacks of outdated reports and water-stained folders. The file box was mislabeled. Missing persons, 1979-1983, which meant no one had looked at it in decades. It was supposed to have been destroyed during a 1998 records purge, but somehow it survived. In 2024, a young detective named Evan Miller, new to the department and eager to make an impression, was assigned to digitize old files. Most cases were routine: petty thefts, runaways, property disputes, until he found Linda's name. The folder smelled of mildew and dust, but when he flipped through it, something caught his eye. Several pages were missing, torn out clean, as if someone didn't want them found. As he dug deeper, Miller discovered an evidence envelope tucked between two unrelated reports. It was unsealed, marked only with faded ink that read, Carver, personal effects. Inside, among a few brittle photos and a diner NAMA tag, was a Polaroid, its surface cracked, the edges curling from time. In the photo stood Linda Carver, smiling beside a man in what appeared to be a sheriff's uniform. The strange part: the patch on his shoulder didn't match the Maple Creek Department's design. It was off by just enough to look wrong. Miller scanned the department's records for that year, checking every deputy's ID photo. Nothing. No one matched the man standing beside Linda. When he showed it to his supervisor, the older detective just frowned and muttered, "That's impossible. That uniform hasn't been used here since '72. That night, Miller couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, had intentionally hidden that photo He started cross-referencing Linda's case with other disappearances from the late 70s, and the patterns were chillingly similar: young women, rural roads, and no witnesses. Even stranger, several of those reports had been filed by the same responding officer, a name Miller didn't recognize from the current staff list. The more he searched, the more he realized that Linda's file wasn't forgotten by accident. It had been buried on purpose. And in a town where everyone knew everyone. The question he couldn't stop asking himself was, who wanted it gone and why? Detective Evan Miller had seen plenty of unsolved cases before, but something about Linda Carver's file wouldn't let him go. The faded photos, the missing reports, the eerie silence from anyone old enough to remember 1978. It all felt like a cover-up. So, one late evening, under the soft hum of fluorescent lights, he pulled out the single remaining piece of physical evidence, a torn fragment of Linda's sweater, sealed in a yellowed plastic bag. The original report claimed it was found near Miller Creek, a mile from her abandoned car. Nobody had ever tested it, not properly. The technology just didn't exist back then. But now, with modern forensics, Miller had a chance to bring science into a story long buried under rumors and fear. Weeks later, the lab called. They'd recovered a partial DNA profile from the sweater fibers, old, degraded, but viable enough to run through the federal database. The hit came fast. At first, the name meant nothing to Miller. But when he read the file, his stomach dropped. The DNA belonged to Frank Holloway, a retired deputy sheriff who'd served in Maple Creek for over 3 decades. Holloway had retired a local hero, Sunday churchgoer, family man, even volunteered as a little league coach. He was the kind of man people waved to at stoplights. But now, the data didn't lie. His genetic fingerprint was woven into Linda's last known piece of clothing. Miller double-checked the test, then ordered a retest through a second lab. Same result. No error. No contamination. When Miller brought the findings to the department's chief, the room went cold. Holloway had worked side by side with some of the town's most respected officers. Men still on the force today. Some refused to believe it. Others got quiet, too quiet. "You're stirring up ghosts, son," one of the older detectives warned. But Miller wasn't after ghosts, he wanted truth. He pulled Holloway's old personnel files. Spotless record, countless commendations. Still, there were strange notes, multiple transfers, gaps in his patrol history, and unsigned memos referencing off-duty patrols near Highway 14. Every clue pointed back to him, and the more Miller uncovered, the more it felt like Maple Creek's golden officer had been hiding something dark, something that science had finally dragged into the light. When Detective Evan Miller and his partner finally drove up to Frank Holloway's farmhouse, the air felt heavy, like even the fields knew something wasn't right. The house sat back from the road, tucked behind a grove of pecan trees, the paint peeling and the porch sagging under years of neglect. Holloway was 80 now, frail, living alone since his wife passed. When Miller knocked on the door, Holloway didn't ask who it was. He just opened it slowly, eyes glassy, as if he'd been expecting this visit for years. "You took your time," he said, voice rough and low. Inside, the house smelled of dust and tobacco. Faded photographs lined the walls. Smiling kids, church events, a lifetime of normal. But on the kitchen table sat a folded sheriff's uniform, neatly pressed, the old badge catching the afternoon light like a relic from another life. Miller slid the Polaroid across the table. the one showing Holloway beside Linda Carver. The old man's hand trembled as he stared at it. "Where'd you find that?" he whispered. Miller didn't answer. Instead, he set down the lab report confirming the DNA match. Holloway stared for a long moment, then leaned back, breathing hard. "You think I don't know what that means?" he muttered, eyes fixed on the badge. "I thought they'd lost that piece. I thought it was gone." His voice cracked, part guilt, part disbelief that the past had finally clawed its way back. Miller pressed gently, asking what happened the night Linda disappeared. Holloway didn't look at him. He just said, "She found something she wasn't supposed to. And back then, I couldn't afford anyone asking questions." For nearly an hour, Holloway spoke in fragments. Not quite confessions, not quite denial. He mentioned routes, deliveries, and people with money who made sure things stayed quiet. His words painted a picture of a small town smuggling network that had operated under everyone's noses, using back roads and patrol routes to move cash, goods, and sometimes worse. Linda, working the late shift at the diner, had seen one of those handoffs. She wasn't supposed to. Holloway said he confronted her that night by the bridge, hoping to scare her into silence. But when she threatened to tell the sheriff, something in him snapped. He didn't elaborate on how or when, only that it was fast and not planned. As his story unfolded, the sound of the old wall clock filled the room, ticking louder and louder, like the heartbeat of a truth that had waited 46 years to be spoken aloud. When word broke about Frank Holloway's arrest, Maple Creek fell silent in a way no one had ever heard before. The man they'd once trusted to protect them, the same officer who'd led the town's safety parades, who gave out candy at Halloween, was suddenly in handcuffs. Local news vans lined Main Street, their cameras flashing against the old brick courthouse as reporters shouted questions that no one dared to answer. In the diner where Linda once worked, the same red booth still stood, but the laughter was gone. People whispered instead, speaking in half sentences. "Did you hear what he said? Oh, 46 years. Can you believe it? I let that man into my house." The community wasn't just shocked. It was betrayed. Everyone in Maple Creek had known Holloway. Some had even called him Uncle Frank. Now, every memory felt contaminated. As the investigation deepened, more unsettling details began to surface. Old case files were reopened. Retired deputies were called back for questioning. There were murmurs that Linda's case might not have been the only one, that the sheriff's department had quietly dismissed similar disappearances through the late 70s and early 80s. People started to wonder how much of what they believed about their small, peaceful town had been a lie. Local churches held vigils for Linda's family, while others prayed for Holloway's soul, unsure which side of the story they even stood on. Reporters from across the state descended on Maple Creek, digging into records that hadn't been touched in decades. What they found made it worse. Missing evidence logs, falsified reports, and signatures that didn't match. The cracks in the system ran deeper than anyone wanted to admit. Still, the most haunting part wasn't the crime. It was how close it had always been. People replayed moments in their minds, seeing Holloway at the grocery store, helping neighbors with yard work, standing in the back of church with his hat in his hands. No one had ever questioned him. Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe that was the point. Now, with every secret spilling out, Maple Creek didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage built on half-truths and forgotten sins. And as reporters packed up and the lights faded from the courthouse steps, one question lingered in the humid Alabama air, quiet but heavy. If the man everyone trusted was capable of this, what else has been hiding in plain sight all these years? Months after Frank Holloway's confession, Maple Creek tried to move on. But some things don't wash away easy. The Twisted Oak by Miller Creek became a memorial site lined with flowers, candles, and photographs of a young woman whose smile never faded in memory. Linda Carver's family finally laid her to rest, her name cleared of every rumor and lie that had followed her disappearance for nearly half a century. As for Holloway, he never stood trial. 2 weeks before his court date, he was found unresponsive in his cell. Heart failure, they said. Some called it karma, others called it cowardice. But Detective Evan Miller didn't see it that way. To him, justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about the truth finally being dragged from the dark, kicking and screaming. He stood by the creek one last time, the water low and quiet now, and whispered, "They didn't forget you, Linda." Not this time. The people of Maple Creek still talk about that summer. How a secret buried for 46 years finally tore the mask off their quiet little town. And though the headlines faded and the cameras moved on, one truth remained etched into the Alabama soil. Sometimes evil doesn't come from the shadows. Sometimes it wears a badge and smiles right back at you.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.